First, no hate to Historical Heathen. Absolutely give him a follow. I follow him because I've seen great conversations he's had with people that I follow. That being said, it's okay to discuss and disagree. I appreciate when people test and poke holes in my theories and understandings. So, the 2 points I made were, 1, that we don't have an exact theology in direct sources, and 2, the Christian scribes who penned the Eddas were biased, specifically in their omission of certain things we have to figure out today.
You say there's no, this is how we see the gods. That's exactly what the Eddas are doing. They're telling us how the gods are perceived by the Norse.
2 points about this common assumption in heathenry. 1, no. We do not have a single heathen account of, I believe, XYZ. What we do have is literary stories. One must understand, when studying the past, how the people of that age perceived their world. Much like movie embellishments today, certain things were made more dramatic and more grandiose to make the stories better. The prose of the poetic meter did maintain some integrity of these past stories, but people before the Enlightenment era were less likely to write events in a more clinical, by-the-numbers fashion. And 2, the Eddas are not a Bible, nor should they be used as one. There's a presumption of inerrancy that the Christian overculture teaches. It teaches us that in order to be valid, we have to believe our religion is true, that you must meet certain criteria in order to be valid, and that puts a pressure on us to think in mythic literalist terms. That because the gods were written as characters, they must, therefore, have been perceived by worshippers as actual tangible beings, despite no evidence of exact theology in any direct sources. You cannot produce a single line from the Eddas or sagas stating the theological understanding of the arch-heathens. Only literary writing of those gods, which is not proof of belief. In other polytheist traditions, we see variance in perspective. In Athens, for example, Socrates, while awaiting trial for impiety, had a conversation about piety with Euthyphro, in which he asks Euthyphro, who had his own father arrested for impiety, what the definition of piety is. He cannot produce a definition for piety that isn't cyclical. Diagoras of Milos was also executed for impiety. He was an atheist who once chopped up a statue of Heracles for firewood and called it the 13th labor of Heracles. We also see in Hinduism, the world's oldest living polytheist religion, a soft polytheist worldview. In fact, the Hindus have many different denominations and worldviews, much like any other religion. The Kemetic Orthodox religion is also soft polytheist, basing their theology on some of the world's oldest surviving writings. So, based on all the evidence we have, including continental Germanic variants, I'd wager that the theology of the arch-heathens cannot be surmised by stories alone, and that, like most of the world, there was a lot of variance. The examples Historical Heathen gives of Hamingia, luck, Fylgja, follower, and Hugr, mind, are not theology. While the multi-part self does allude to animist beliefs, these are not gods, nor do they prove to us the efficacy of any one type of theology, only a belief in some things beyond corporeal reality. On to my second point, Christian scribes.
The Christian scribes omitted those aspects? No, they didn't. They're skalds, first and foremost, and a skald is a historian and a poet, not a religious scholar.
Snorri Sturluson was a Christian skald educated by Sæmundur Fróði, an Icelandic priest. Back in that era, clergy were the main body of population possessing the ability to read and write. Likewise, the Poetic Edda was compiled by Icelandic bishop Brynjolfur Sveinsson, who first named it Edda, so we can thank him for that. While he credited Sæmundur Fróði with authorship, we don't actually know who these skalds were. We only know, based on writing style, that it was multiple authors over a long period of time. But due to literacy being in the wheelhouse of the clergy, it does seem likely the authors were Christian, and probably clerics, or at the very least, taught by Christian clerics. I hope that clears up my statement. A brief point before I'm done. Appeal to the past fallacies are another thing we should understand while researching and developing our beliefs. We have a tendency to want our unnamed, unknown heathen forebears to approve of us, so we attempt to appeal to those past amorphic figures. Don't. It hinders exploration and understanding of your own personal worldview. I don't know if that's what historical heathen is doing, but I see it all the time. The arch-heathens weren't perfect. They were flesh and blood human beings, just like you and me. Most likely, our lore was their personal gnosis. It's only more valid because it reflects the religion we're attempting to reconstruct. Just because something is old doesn't mean it's more valid. And we learn from the past going into the future. We don't emulate the past to live as the arch-heathens. So, even if we did find a document stating one arch-heathen's exact theology, it still wouldn't negate modern theological discussion and understandings. It would just be one opinion of thousands, if not billions. And that's a good thing. It's good to discuss and wonder what's beyond us. Don't let the imaginary approval of unknown ancestors guide your path. They'd probably respect tenacity and thinking outside the box anyway. You don't need to appeal to the past. Happy doom scrolling.